Hi, my name is Abrah Arneson, and I'm a clinical herbal therapist in practice in Ottawa, Ontario, and at my home in the beautiful Gatineau Hills of Quebec. I'm in my home right now. This is my apothecary behind me, or some of it. And I like to call it my beast because I have to tend to it every day, feed it, and take things away from it. And yeah, it's an ongoing project, an apothecary. So I am always studying the body mind complex, which is what I call the sort of the human being. And as opposed to body and mind, I see it as a complex woven together. And as a herbalist, because I put herbs, plants in people's bodies to support their wellness. And I need to understand as best as I can what's happening inside them in health and in illness. So I spend a lot of time looking at the body. And I find plant medicine does very well. My understanding of plant medicine grows when I approach an understanding of the body from different points of view. So the biomedical model of the body is really important, but there's other ways of looking at the body that are equally important when it comes to working in a holistic model of plant medicine. And by a holistic model, what I mean is we're looking at the medicine of relationships. So, for example, it might be a person's relationship in their partnership is affecting their health, and that would be a relationship that needs some support to ease whatever tension is being caused or lack of tension that is being caused by that relationship. Or you might be looking at the relationship between blood and the liver and how to support the liver and how to support the blood. Or you might be looking at the relationship of elements in the body. And this would be more of an energetic model of herbal medicine, looking at like the water element in the body and how it's interacting with the earth element in the body. So, holistic medicine for me is the medicine of relationships, and these are dynamic relationships, as all relationships are dynamic. They're not static. They're in movement, they're in flow, they're in friction, and they're in harmony. And that's how relationships happen. So when I'm thinking about anatomy and physiology and plant medicine, that's how I'm thinking. I'm thinking in relationship. And today we're going to talk about connective tissue. And connective tissue is ultimately about the relationship between every part of your body because it connects everything to everything else. So let's begin. Oops, did I do that again? I have to do a share. Oh, where are you? Hold on a minute. You would think by now I would have perfected using Zoom. And clearly, I am still figuring it out. Okay, there. Okay, so here's our little PowerPoint. Let's make it big. Okay, so here's connective tissue, and this is that connective tissue called the extracellular matrix. This is an image of this, and obviously it's not purple. We're not purple inside, although it would be kind of cool to be in purple on the inside and outside. But this is a stain used to see these tissues in a microscope. So connective tissue is a web, and webs are really important. Nets, weavings, fabric. Uh, Anyone who knows me and knows my writing, I'm always referring to the weavings in life, or the web of life, or the fabric of life. I love these metaphors both for the body mind complex, and for life in general. And these are very old metaphors: the weaving, the web, the net. And all cultures use these metaphors to describe life, to describe the interconnectedness of life, connective tissue of life. And it's interesting when one moves into a very deep exploration of the web of life. One finds that there can be great harmony within that web. Some people call it the beauty wave, and I just love that expression. Thank you, Rosemary Gladstar, for that expression. Um, the beauty wave. And the beauty wave creates harmony within the web of life. So, whether that is the connective tissue, the web of your inner body, the web of your mind body complex, or the web of your entire life, and all the living beings all around you, plants, animals, minerals, do I dare say, um, creates this web, the harmony within the web, within the weaving, within the connection. Whereas the more difficult experiences of an emotional life, like hatred, anger, jealousy, shame, they create a disharmony, a disconnection in the web of life. They create a fragmented web of life, and that fragmentation creates senses of isolation. So, one of the most important aspects of for mental health is to feel connected to life. When we feel connected to life, we feel purposeful, meaningful. We're involved in giving our gifts, we're involved in receiving after giving our gifts. There's a sense of abundance, whether there's material wealth or not. Um, yeah, so bringing harmony to the web of life is very important for inner health, outer health, the health of communities, the health of forests, the health of oceans, the health of our amazing planet, maybe the health of the solar system, even. So it's really important to spend time every day recognizing beauty, catching the beauty wave, and riding that beauty wave through the interconnected web of life. And then, we all have difficulties and we all have difficult times where fragmenting emotional states take charge of our mind body complex. And in that situation, instead of trying to get rid of those aspects of our beings, those feelings that create fragmentation, I think it's better to ask the question, what kind of medicine does this state of being need to return to a form of harmony? And then seek out that medicine. And often that medicine is beauty. So just saying. Okay, so oh yeah, here. In old European traditions, they would talk about the body being woven in the uterus. Of course, women were working continuously with threads and spinning and weaving. And so when they were pregnant, they were thinking that the body was being woven, and the weaving is basically, one could say, connective tissue. We see connective tissue in many places throughout life. Nature loves to repeat uh, uh, forms and functions that work. And nature does actually work very well. So in the beehive, there is honey comb, the comb. This is the comb. And it acts very much like a connective tissue does in our body in the beehive. One thing that the cone does is it provides an environment for the eggs, the queen lays, to grow into bees. And it's very cool looking at the cone and seeing the little bees coming out. It's also a storage system. So they store their pollen and their honey and all sorts of stuff in these in the cones. It also helps regulate the temperature of the hive, and it also supports communication amongst the hive. So the vibration of the cone is part of what the bees are reading when they're communicating with each other, and their hum creates a vibration within the cone. So this is all functions of connective tissue in our body. You're going to find, once you start looking for connective tissue in nature, you're going to find it everywhere, and often with similar functions. Diamonds, this is the connective tissue of diamonds. These are the minerals and these are the connecting parts. And again, it's a web. It's a systematic web. It's a pattern, it's a repeating pattern. And that is really what connective tissue is. Healthy connective tissue is a repeating pattern. And if you think about, like, if we go back to that idea of connecting with life, being in connection with life, you'll see that all of a sudden you're part of a pattern of life. And it's very meaningful to be part of life. And of course, the spider web. We have to talk about the spider web if we're talking about weavings and webs and connecting and connective tissue. And then there's the solar system up there, the big sky above us. And this is an image of what's called, oh, what's this guy called again? It's the Hercules Corona Borealis Great Wall. And they're actually measuring connections between each of its stars, which means each of its solar systems within this area. And there is this galactic connecting force throughout the universe that connects life. And, just think, without our sun, we would be like floating off into space. Without the moon, our gravitational field would be totally destroyed. Jupiter has huge impact on this planet and what happens on this planet. So there's this connecting aspect that's on a micro level and on a macro level in life. Oh, yeah. And then there's the World Wide Web. So when I was young, we did not have a World Wide Web when I had an answering machine. I did not have a phone I carried with me. But in any case, now we have this amazing World Wide Web. And again, we can see how this web, this interconnection can be used for great benefit to many, many people, and can create harmony amongst all life forms on this planet. And it can also create disharmony, it can create fragmentation. And it really depends on the intention of the user. What is the intention? And that's why it's so important to walk with intention, to eat with intention, to sleep with intention, to live a life of intention, because that will affect your connection with life and your connective tissue. Okay, so let's get down to some more pragmatic aspects of connective tissue. What is connective tissue? Well, it's the tissue that connects bones, organs, blood vessels, skin, and every cell of your being. And it creates a fluidity of movement. Connective tissue, one of the things it is about is movement, allowing the body to move without losing its form. So it's both a container and a fluidity of movement. And so here we are, in vitro, very small little being developing. And these are the different levels of connective tissue developing. So the spinal column, there's a lot of connective tissue there. All these bones are all connective tissue. All the muscles are coming in. The nervous system, there's connective tissue all through the nervous system. So you can see how the body is built over time, over those 9 months, with connective tissue. And the connective tissue changes significantly from the time of conception to the time of death. There's a total shift, a growing, a malleability, a pliability to connective tissue. And then, as you become an adult, the connective tissue is still malleable, but it's more firm, it's a little harder. Adults don't tend to be as flexible in their views and ability to learn language and things like that as little kids. They don't have the same kind of pliability. And then as we get older, the connective tissue tends to get a little harder or a little looser. And yeah, so connective tissue changes as our body changes. Think of connective tissue as a function. So I always like to think of the different parts of our body as functions, not so much as parts. Sometimes when I think of like if I think of the liver and I just think of it as a thing, I kind of lose the whole verbing principle of the liver. The liver is really an activity in a set location in the body, certain tissues doing these activities. So I like to really consider the function more when I'm talking about something than the objective. This is it, this is how it fits. This is its shape. This is what it does. And that so the function is the physiology. And think of it as allowing harmonious movement and connectivity throughout the body. Whereas connective tissue found it's everywhere. It's everywhere. Connective tissue keeps us whole. Without connective tissue, we'd all just be a bunch of parts falling apart. Like, when they say, oh, falling apart, that's a connective tissue problem, right? Broken bones, that's a connective tissue problem. Prolapses is a connective tissue problem. Wrinkles, it's a connective tissue problem. Any time where the body starts kind of falling apart, losing the plot, it's a connective tissue problem. If we didn't have connective tissue, we'd just be a bunch of parts. Connective tissue is also a container. So if we look at the orange, there's all these little kind of connective tissue um, sheaths that contain each little area of pulp, and it keeps each area's moisture contained. So connective tissue contains the viscous substances of our body. And the viscous substances is essentially water with a lot of stuff floating around in. And this is called in one level of a connective tissue is the extracellular matrix. So the extracellular matrix helps keep the interstitial fluid, which I did a video on interstitial fluid, and herbal medicine and interstitial fluid is extremely connected. And a lot of plants, particularly plants we call lymphatics, are engaged in the interstitial fluid. So it's very useful to understand a little bit about the interstitial fluid if you're practicing herbal medicine. Anyways, the extracellular matrix runs through the interstitial fluid, and the interstitial fluid is fluid. That's what it is. And it's the fluid that the cells float in. The extracellular matrix connects the cells through the interstitial fluid, and it also helps keep just like the orange, the fluid from just running out and becoming a puddle. If we didn't have a good extracellular matrix, there is a breakdown in the container of the body, and theoretically, we could just become a puddle with bits and pieces in it if we did not have a good, solid, strong connective tissue. And you'll see that in people with a lot of swollen ankles or a lot of puffiness. The connective tissue is not that well. You'll see it like if people have had a lot of weight and then they lost weight and they have an apron. That's a connective tissue problem. That's loose connective tissue. It's been broken down. It's been stretched too much. The same thing with prolapses. Osteoporosis is a connective tissue problem. The body, it's not, the bone isn't holding together. We're going to talk about that a little more. Also, I really like that the extracellular matrix is sometimes called the matrix. And I have images of, Kenny Reeves doing his beautiful movements through space. And yeah, so it's a matrix. So here's a great image. I love this image of the connective tissue running through the interstitial fluid. This is the extracellular matrix. It's also called the extracellular matrix. And I'm just going to move me. So let's look at a few things. So here's the hyaluronic acid. And hyaluronic acid is really important, and it helps control the movement of fluid within the interstitial fluid. Yeah, it helps control the interstitial fluid movement. This is collagen here interacting with the hyaluronic acid. And collagen is all over the body. And collagen is kind of like a stretchy, tough substance. And it is connective tissue. It is like kind of the core of connective tissue. And collagen, and we'll talk a little bit more about collagen in a bit. Then we have these elastic fibers, and you can see some of the cells are run along the elastic fibers. And these are actually what gives the elastic tissue. Connective tissue is generally stretchy. It has some stretch, it has some give, and it's the elastic fibers that are doing that. The reticular fibers, again, these are controlling, creating pockets for the fluid to move through, and the cells are also run along the reticular fibers. Blood vessels and the lymphatic uh, are also considered connective tissue. We have this little fat cell. Fat cells are connective tissues as well. And I just want to point out this is a fibroblast, and fibroblasts are what repair connective tissue when it's damaged. So we'll hear a lot about fibroblasts with scab formation and fibroblasts helping to heal bone. Fibroblasts, they're healers in the body, and they heal connective tissue. What else do I want to talk about here? I think that's pretty much it. So these are different types of connective tissue running through the interstitial fluid, and these are fibers that make up the extracellular matrix. So there's some plants that we can use to support the extracellular matrix, and a big one is Echinacea. And Echinacea is traditionally a snake root, so it would have been called snake root. Now, when you dig up Echinacea roots, they certainly look like snakes, but they contain a phytoconstituent that supports the health. Oops, there's my pussycat. Why does she show up now? Okay. Okay, just a second. Let me move her. Okay, down you get, Lucy. Anyways, what they do is it supports the health of the hyaluronic acid. Cancer and some bacteria release an enzyme that breaks down the hyaluronic acid, and it allows the cancer cells or the bacteria to move with ease through the interstitial fluid and either infect or spread, okay, other tissues or spread to other tissues. So by using Echinacea, we protect that hyaluronic acid that is part of the extracellular matrix and support limiting the spread of viruses, cancer, bacteria. This is just a study on Echinacea being used to limit the spread of HPV, which is important. And as a herbalist, I see this virus often in my in clinic and support women with their health in HPV, overcoming HPV, or at least putting it to bed. And Echinacea, I always use Echinacea. Rosemary and sage are also plants that are supportive of connective tissue, and they're very high in two flavonoids called rutin and cortisone. And these flavonoids in particular are interested in protecting the elasticin in the extracellular matrix. Both rutin and cortisone are low solubility in tea, so I usually make a fresh plant medicine, a fresh plant tincture with these herbs each fall. I grow these plants in my garden, as I also grow the Echinacea gustifolia in my garden. And the thing with the flavonoids, if you want a plant that's really, if you want to make medicine that's really high in flavonoids, you want to let it sit in the sun a little bit, give it some sunlight before harvesting the plant. Try to get it when the sun's strong, because the plant's making the flavonoids to protect itself from the radiation of the sun. And so if you harvest the plant before it's been exposed to a strong sun, the flavonoid content is lower than if it's been exposed to a higher level of sun, um, which is not usually what we're taught, especially with the aromatic plants. You harvest them before the sun hits them, because the volatile oils, which is a big part of their medicine, is dispersed with heat into the air. So it's kind of like you gotta decide, what are you doing with this plant? What do you want, you know? And I find both these plants are really aromatic, and I can afford to have a bit of sun on them and still get really good medicine and have a higher flavonoid content, which is often what I'm after when I'm using these plants. But let's just go back a couple of slides and look at, so these plants high in flavonoids are antioxidant, and that means that they pick up loose oxygen molecules. So here in the interstitial fluid, we have the arterial, the capillary, and it's releasing oxygen into the interstitial fluid, and that oxygen's floating around, interacting with the collagen, the reticular fibers, the elastin, and a loose collagen, a loose oxygen molecule. You want to think of it like a little spark. Oxygen represents the fire element if we go into an elemental model. Um, just think of the oxygen tank that people use are attached to for breathing, and there's always that fire symbol. Oxygen is flammable. It's like little sparks. And when it's loose, it will interact with these different fibers and burn little holes in them, weakening the connective tissue. So when you take a plant that's high in flavonoids, what happens with the flavonoids is they scoop up the oxygen molecules and attach themselves to it, so that it's attached to something and it can't burn little holes in these fibers nor in cell membranes. The flavonoid doesn't hold on to the oxygen molecule forever. It releases it back because the cells are always seeking oxygen for making energy. So it sucks up the loose oxygen molecule, the flavonoid takes it up, then releases it back. And if the cells in the area need the oxygen molecule, they'll pull it in and use it. If not, the flavonoid will suck the oxygen molecule up and then release it back into the fluid, and the cell will pick it up. And that's kind of how it happens, so that they're not floating around for too long causing problems. They're attached to something that kind of keeps them contained. Flavonoids contain the fire element. So these are two great plants. And I'm trying to kind of focus on 100-mile medicine with this video, that we can use medicine in our area that grows here with good effect, that we don't have to go all over the world looking for special herbs that do special things, that we can grow these plants in our garden or find them growing in our environment. Horsetail is a really important plant for echinacea, or for connective tissue. Horsetail is like a funny plant. A lot of people have different ideas about horsetail. Most herbalists you talk to will have a different opinion about how, when it's good to harvest, when it's not good to harvest, how to get the medicine out of it, whether you can get the medicine out of it, blah, blah, blah. One thing I do know, a couple of things I do know about horsetail that I subscribe to, is I harvest it when it looks like this. This is when I harvest the horsetail. I also want to know, it likes to grow in moist areas. So there's a lot of streams where I live. So it will be around the streams, and I'll go harvest it. But I want to know what's happening upstream, because horsetail pulls toxins out of the earth. So if you have a lot of horsetail growing and there's been a lot of pesticide use or chemical use, um, or fertilizer use, you want to be careful with that horsetail, because it will be cleaning up the water. It will be cleaning up the earth. You can think of horsetail as a scouring brush, and that will help you remembering that it cleans soil. Sometimes you'll find it in really dry soil too. Um, Okay, so, and then the solubility of the medicine, but we'll get to that. So the big medicine in horsetail, as far as I understand, is silica. And silica is a sticky substance, and it's found wherever there's stretchy tissue in the body. And that stretchy tissue is basically connective tissue. So silica is very high in your bones. Now, we don't think of our bones as stretchy, but our bones aren't brittle. They have some flex. They're hard, but they definitely have some flex. And what happens is the silica is sticky, and it's the calcium and the phosphorus that stick to the collagen. Silica is a big part of collagen. And if there's a silicon deficiency in the body, there's a collagen deficiency in the body, and this will create weak bones, brittle bones. So with horsetail, think stretchy and sticky, and that will help uh, if a tissue's hard and lacking stretch like a bladder, or if it's lost its stretch and it doesn't rebound like a bladder, you can use horsetail. I sometimes I'll use horsetail in a decoction, a prolonged decoction. I most often use it in a fresh plant tincture at 70% alcohol. That's my kind of go-to horsetail. You're going to see a lot of warnings online about horsetail and kidney damage. The thing is that when you think about plant medicine, you want to think about there's medicine at a certain dose and poison at a certain dose. And this is certainly true with horsetail. At a certain dose, at a lower dose, this plant is medicine. And at a really high dose, this plant can damage at a high dose for a prolonged period of time. This plant can damage kidneys. And also, if someone has weak kidney, I would definitely, be very careful using this plant. So you always want to think about dose before you decide a plant is poison. You need to understand that differentiation. So let's just look at the bones. So this is osteoporosis, and this is healthy bone tissue. So if you're looking at this, you'll see that there's big holes in the bones. Here it's pretty, there's some holes, but they're not like, transparent, see-through. And that hole is caused by a lack of collagen. So the calcium and the phosphorus doesn't have anything to attach to. It doesn't have a net to catch it, like the spider web catches the dew in the morning. If the spider web wasn't there, it wouldn't be catching the dew. So the silica, the collagen and the silica in the collagen creates the web within the bone for these harder minerals to stick to. And this is why sometimes if people are taking a high dose calcium, it starts getting deposited in other parts of the body. It's not that the dose of calcium, it's just that the bones can't pick it up, can't carry it because the collagen's been disrupted. And that's osteoporosis. And these types of folks with this deficiency, they don't fall and break a bone. Their bones can't bear weight. And what will happen is they will one day stand up or bend over to pick up something or something like that. And the bone will shatter because it doesn't have that stretch, that malleability for the movement. And it just shatters their brittle bones, and they shatter into many, many pieces. And that's what happens. So it's really important if you're working with people with weak bones to make sure they're getting some silica to support the collagen, along with some flavonoids to protect that extracellular matrix, which collagen um, is part of. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the elements. So water, connective tissue is very watery. It's generally sticky and stretchy, and water is sticky. If you put two drops of water side by side, they'll come together. There's a magnetic pull between them and they'll come together. And that's that sticky nature. Water holds us together. I live in a hilly area, and right now we're in the spring, and the snow's pretty much gone, but there's a lot of water coming down the hill, and it doesn't come down all over the hill. It comes down in streams. Water likes to stick together. Even when it evaporates up into the sky, it comes back together as clouds. Raindrops are little, a collection of water molecules. Water is sticky. So without the water, there's dryness, and the dryness doesn't stick well. Things don't stick to it. And just think about really dry soil, it just crumbles, whereas wet soil has that cohesiveness. So, a great plant to help um, bring some moisture into connective tissue, in particular tendons, ligaments, muscles, and bones. But I would also use it for the lining of intestines and the lining of lung tissue and the heart, is Solomon seal. And it's a super moist plant. It's a demulcent. And I, when you're thinking about Solomon seal, think creaky, cracky, and stiff. So if someone says, "Oh, my lungs just feel stiff," say they smoke a lot of cigarettes or a lot of weed, and they're putting a lot of that heat into their lungs, then you might use a plant like Solomon seal to moisten the connective tissue, make it stretchy and sticky again, opening it up. This Solomon seal is very specific to tendons, ligaments, and bones. Very specific. And when I see a lot of issues with spines and aching in the pelvic region from spine problems. I also see a lot of neck. I post COVID. I don't know how many sore necks I've seen with post COVID, with everybody working from home all the time on their computers, blah, 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 like just so bad for necks. So anyway, Solomon seal is part of it to bring the moisture back into the connective tissue, make the body flexible, able to resist shocks. Mm. Solomon seal, really important. It's the root you use. And I use a fresh plant tincture with Solomon seal mostly. And again, I grow Solomon seal in my garden easily, easily. Earth is a big part of connective tissue because connective tissue isn't just about movement and fluidity, it's also about stability. It allows us to stay whole while we move through our life. And it connective tissue is also a container. Remember those little sheaths in the orange that contain the water within the orange. So the earth element is the container, and it's really important to have lots of minerals to support the health of connective tissue, as we saw that with bones. Bones is the calcium and the phosphorus, and that those are minerals that stick to the collagen to make something solid for us to support basic structure of our body. One really high mineral plant that I love this plant so much is raspberry leaf, and it is so high in minerals. A lot of times we talk about nettles or alfalfa as a plant's high in minerals, but don't forget about good old raspberry leaf. It's very drying. I understand that about this plant, and we are talking about putting a lot of moisture in, but you can counteract that drying by adding a plant like Solomon seal to the mix. Um, this plant is really great for bones, but it's great for connective tissue all over the body because it's so high in minerals. And it's such a lovely tea. So, fire is a big part of connective tissue, and fire can be cold. The fire element can be cold. In some ways, it would be better to call the fire element the temperature element because if there's a lack of fire, there's cold. And if there's too much fire, there's a lot of heat. So, you want a balance of the fire element. Coldness tends to contract the connective tissue, create tension in the body. Coldness does. Like if like where I live, it gets cold for a while, and you go outside and you just feel your body contract. and that contraction stiffens, and over time will dry out that tension, will create heat. That's why we tense up when it's cold, because tension creates heat in the body, and that heat will eventually dry out the connective tissue. So you want to have good flow of temperature through the body, and that's good flow of blood. So the fire element's really important for keeping a healthy connective tissue. And connective tissue is all about movement. It ultimately, in some ways, you could say the connective tissue is air element because it's about movement. It allows our body to move as a whole, even though it's a bunch of parts. So I chose to talk about rubefacins for the air and the fire element. And this is old medicine, rubefacins. It's kind of like always there's a kind of medicine that I think about with herbal medicine that's like, I call it grandmother medicine. It's the medicine that our ancestors used that weren't necessarily apothecaries or considered themselves herbalists, but they were remedies that women passed down to support the health of their families. So if someone had achy, cold joints, and this would have been called rheumatism in the past, rubefacins were often used. So plants like horseradish, which is a really easy plant to grow, and you can get really good medicine out of that horseradish plant. Uh, Cayenne peppers, which you can get a really nice season of cayenne peppers in the summer where I live. Ginger, not so much, but we do have a wild ginger here. Um, and what you do is you make a poultice with these plants and put them over cold, achy joints, and they create a mild inflammatory response in the body. And that mild inflammatory response brings heat and movement into these cold, stiff, achy joints and nourishes the connective tissue so that it becomes fluid and flexible and movement again. Yeah, rheumatism, it's interesting. The word rheum comes from the word for stream in Latin. And it's this really idea of it's the streaming in the body. So rubefins help create a better streaming in the body. And that stream, its boundaries is the connective tissue. So healthy connective tissue creates good streams in the body. And rubefacins you can use to help support that. Okay, let's look at another way of looking at connective tissue. It's like the scaffolding. It gives structure to the soft, squishy parts of the body. So in the skin, these lines here, this is all collagen. Again, more collagen. And it's the connective tissue. It connects the layers of the skin together. And here's all the fat. And fat is also connective tissue. And we're going to talk about fat. Skin, connective tissue. So it gives structure. It's the scaffolding. In some ways, the scaffolding is a funny word because the scaffold is usually, you don't want it to move because you're going up the scaffold up into, climbing up it. You don't want it to move. You don't want it to. And connective tissue moves. It's flexible. So connective tissue provides structure for movement, or structure that allows movement. So these trees here have really good connective tissue because they're just blowing in the wind, right? This guy, not so much. He's been sitting in that chair a little too long and his connective tissue is weak and it's not providing good structure. So there's a lot of achy pains when they move. Movement strengthens connective tissue. There's this really old healing song. It's like from the 10th century, I think. It's probably much older than that. And it was probably sung a lot on battlefields. And what you would do is you were singing this song is you would put knots in a thread and then tie that thread on the person for healing, or you could sing the song while doing a laying on hands. And I think of this as a connective tissue song because everything it's talking about is the connective tissue. So it's joint to joint of it and sinew to sinew. muscle to muscle of it, and vessel to vessel. So we're connecting the body up, strength to strength of it, and habit to habit. And the habit's a big part of the teaching this song's offering us, because the connective tissue does form according to habits. So if someone has the posture habit of this, the connective tissue will eventually form that way. And, people end up going to physio or doing a bunch of yoga to correct that habit and reshape, reform the connective tissue. It's a really interesting song to consider. So different types of connective tissue. So there's loose fibrous connective tissue, and that's basically the extracellular matrix. There's collagen in the cartilage in your joints. That's all connective tissue. Bone, that's connective tissue. And fat is connective tissue. So let's just look at a few of these different types of connective tissue. So blood is connective tissue, which is totally like counterintuitive, because it's like, wow, this stuff really moves around. It doesn't seem connected to each other. Like, it's just, how could that be connective tissue? Basically, they say because it's floating in plasma, which is a matrix. So anything that's floating in a matrix is connective tissue, which essentially means our whole body is connective tissue then. Um, yeah, and the physiologists believe that when scabs are formed, that's a true statement about the connective tissue of blood. Is it just becomes very sticky and hard, and underneath is the healing. So with blood, you want to think about thick blood. If you get your fingers on a pulse, and you'll feel the thickness in the pulse, you'll feel the thickness in the blood. The pulse will be kind of boom, boom, boom. Often it will be hot because the fire element isn't moving well in the body. It's kind of like stuck. It's thick. Um, you're going to use plants that support good flow of blood. And so one would be cleavers to thin out the interstitial fluid, and support better flow between the interstitial fluid and the blood. Ginger quickens the flow of blood. And black cohosh is an alternative. It's a blood cleanser. So basically, you're looking at your alternatives here with thick blood. And then if you have thin blood, you're going to have a hard time keeping temperature. You're going to be cold, and you want to feed and nourish that thin blood. And with that, you use your plants high in minerals like nettle and alfalfa. And the pulse will be thin. It might be a bit deep too, but it will be thin. It will be a thin pulse. You'll feel it. Bone is connective tissue. We kind of covered this a little bit, but look at this weaving. This is the weaving of the bone. Um, yeah, so there's collagen, elastin fibers. That's basically your connective tissue, as we've spoken. And the silica is really important for the bones. And that's basically the collagen and the elastic fiber. And the connective tissue offers strength and flexibility to this tissue. Really interesting plant for bones is mullein. And mullein is seen as a plant that moistens connective tissue, so joints, ligaments, tendons, and the tissues around the bones. It's very specific when there's a lot of creaking and cracking and misalignments in the spine. I just made my fresh plant mullein tincture. I make a fresh plant tincture in around this time of year, early spring, with mullein, using the root and the leaves of a second year plant. So before it comes up, it's a plant, it's a biannual. So the first year it's just a flat, and you could harvest it also in the fall. The first year plants in the fall. I like to harvest them in the spring. And because it has the energy of going upwards in the spring. Um, yeah, so I harvest the plants then. And if you take a mullein plant, a big tall mullein plant, and and cut it and hang it upside down over your head, you'll feel your spine immediately align and become very straight. Some people talk about, I have not done this. I don't have experience with doing this. I don't really have back problems of cutting a mullein, a very tall mullein, and laying it along in their bed the way their spine would lay when they sleep, and that it realigns the spine over time. But mullein is very specific for helping support healthy bone, the surrounding of the bone and ligaments and tendons. And I often combine mullein, the fresh plant root leaf tincture, with a tincture of Solomon seal and black cohosh for spinal problems or pelvic problems or neck problems. So when I say problems, I'm talking about misalignments, achy pain, things like that, chronic pain. I'll use them in those situations. Fascia is another connective tissue, and this stuff is so weird. That it's like all over our body. It covers everything. Gil Headley, he's a physiologist, and he has the best videos on physiology. He does a great video called Talking About Fuzz or something, or The Truth About Fuzz or something. And I strongly recommend you check out that video to understand fascia and the relationship between movement and moisture in the body. Yeah, so this is a new organ that's been discovered, fascia. It covers everything in our body, and it's a system of a protection, but it's also a system of movement. It helps us move in harmony, everything move together in harmony. It has a lot to do with communication and flow. And you can think of dry or wet fascia. So if you have dry fascia, so everything's kind of stiff and creaky, and or you've been eating too much really uh, let's just go back to the person who smokes a lot. The fire dries out the fascia. So you want to re-moisten it. And so again, we're using plants that are demulcents like butterfly weed, Asclepias tuberosa, another plant I grow in my garden. And the roots of this plant are known to moisten the stretchy tissues in the body, in particular the pleura, and that's the sac that the lungs are contained in. And all over our body, things are contained in sacs, like the pericardium. I would use butterfly weed to moisten the pericardium. And I see this as an extension of the fascia. So you want to put moisture into the body. Whereas if there's too much moisture, things get boggy, and that affects movement and flow and communication between different parts of the body as well. So in that situation, you might use a plant like cleavers to remove some of the excess moisture from the body. Plantain is such an interesting plant, and it's everywhere and it's easy to find. The hard part is finding really nice plantain. So I actually have a part of my garden where I just let the plantain grow, and I use that those plants to make medicine. I use both a plantain in a tea, and I have a fresh plant tincture of plantain always on hand. I find this plant an amazing plant for so many things. And it is known as a superlative um, plant for repairing connective tissue. It's often found in cancer formulas specifically for that reason. It provides very high levels of minerals. It also is high in flavonoids, and vitamin C is a flavonoid. So remember, it protects the body from oxidation or damage of loose oxygen molecules. It also draws poison. It's a drawing plant. It's an astringent and a demulcent at the same time. It 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 traditionally was called a snake plant, a snakeweed, and often it's said because the flower, this part is the flower of the plant, and This part here is the flower, and it looks like a snake's tail, a rattlesnake's tail. But I wonder if it's, and that's a signature for it to be snakeweed, and it would be used if there was a snake bite to topically as a poultice to draw the poison. The snake and cats also carry poison in their teeth, just so you know. Pull the poison out of the wound, but it also helps protect the extracellular matrix. And that's, remember, that snake poison um, has enzymes that destroy the hyaluronic acid. And so I just always wonder, like, is this plant actually protecting the extracellular matrix? Is that what it actually does? And in some ways, it's the threads in the leaves that suggest that to me more than anything else. Well, there's a lot of research on this plant and a healthy connective tissue, and it's everywhere. It's so easy to find. The problem is finding really nice quality, and I always harvest it when it looks so beautiful. It's that nice fresh green, not when it's kind of like dried out and, the dog has peed on it 20 times and everybody's walked over it and that kind of stuff. But like when it's in its full beauty. I very rarely harvest it once it's gone to flower. I don't think I ever have harvested it once it's gone to flower. I love the fresh plant tincture. So fat, let's talk about fat. I'm super crazy interested in fat cells right now. Um, as a herbalist, I'm always trying to learn more about the body, and I realized, oh, I need to study fat cells more. So, fat is considered connective tissue. And in some ways, I think fat is like the ultimate connective tissue because it does so many things for us and it's all over our body. There's subcutaneous fat under our skin, visceral fat around our organs, bone marrow is fat. There's fat everywhere. And it's good. Fat is important. What does it do? It's an endocrine organ. This is really important, especially if you're working with people who have an endocrine imbalance. And from a holistic point of view, which from that point, when I talk about holistic medicine, again, I'm talking about the medicine of relationship. A lot of times you'll hear when people talk about an endocrine imbalance, oh, it's the thyroid, oh, it's estrogen, oh, it's cortisol. But these hormones all interact together. They don't interact in isolation. So when we're thinking about um, a good flow of hormones through the body at different times of day, different parts of a cycle. The hormones are cycling, they cycle. Um, you want to think about how they're all interacting and uh, respond accordingly with your medicine. You don't want to just pick on one hormone. At least that's my thought. And estrogen gets picked on a lot. Um, and fat has a whole obesity or a really small lack of fat in the body can have a profound effect on the endocrine system. And that needs to be profoundly considered when looking at endocrine imbalances. Fat cells also store toxins. That's why people get fatty livers, is because the liver can't handle the toxic load. So it just like pops the toxins in the fat that surround the liver to protect the liver. And that's what a fatty liver is. So eliminating toxins from the fat cell is is something herbal medicine can do. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. And it's something one needs to be aware of if supporting someone who is carrying extra weight, is that there is a toxic load stored in those fat cells. Yeah, so fat also generates heat or it keeps us cool. Some body types, depending on what kind of landscape their ancestors are from, have carry more fat than other people. So, for example, the Inuit from in the Arctic, they're chubby folks because it's friggin' cold up there, and they need that extra layer of fat for insulation to keep their body warm. And it's interesting also, some of the people in the Caribbean, they're smaller bodies that are chubby. And again, this is to keep their bodies cool. The fat keeps their bodies cool. So it's really important to appreciate where someone's ancestors have come from before deciding that, they're fat. Like, it's just like our bodies are made according to the environments we live in, not, yeah. So all these things that fat does, it's super important. Oh yeah, fat has a whole role in regulating inflammation as well. So it's an immune organ as well. I just think it's a really interesting cell, the fat cell. So there's a lot of research right now, of course, in weight loss, because that is a big money making industry within the industrial medical complex, as we are seeing in the news these days with their new prescription medication. So there's a lot of support out there for plants that are high in volatile oils. There's a lot of looking at them for weight loss. But what these plants do is what they actually detox the fat cell. So they make the fat cell work better. The fat cell is doing a lot of work for your body. And you want a fat cell that's healthy and strong and can work hard and for you. And these plants remove toxins out of the fat cells. Holy basil, in some ways I'm hesitant to repeat this because I can't remember the source where I read this years ago, but somewhere I came across teaching that holy basil is used in Ayurvedic medicine to draw THC out of fat cells. So someone who's been smoking a lot of weed, the THC is stored in fat cells, which your brain has a lot of fat in it. The fat is very much about conductivity of nervous and signaling within the nervous system. So it's all about communication, and so holy basil will help clear toxins out of the fat cells. From a European herbal medicine point of view, back to sage, and fennel, and these are all really easy plants to grow in your garden. They also are traditional weight loss herbs. And what I think they do is they draw the toxins out of the fat cell, which means the fat cell uh, has a better chance of uh, doing the work it needs to do. And does that, in the end, create a certain level of weight loss? I have to wonder if we're missing the point totally when it comes to obesity. Tension. So here's connective tissue. Highways. Highways are connective tissue too. It's a weaving. Oh, it just makes me tense thinking about driving on those highways. I live in the country, so I, kind of drive on a lot of country roads. I do drive in cities, but I do get very tense driving in cities. Often I take a GABA supplement before I drive in a city just to stay calm. But in any case, tension. Tension affects connective tissue. I touched on this a little bit before. Like when we go into the cold, we get tense, and that tension generates heat within our body. And when there's too much heat, connective tissue starts drying out. And connective tissue likes to be moist because it's stretchy. And when it's dry, it loses its stretch. It's like dry hair over nice moist hair. So when you're talking about connective tissue, when I'm working with connective tissue, I like to use plants that release tension in the body. I'm not crazy about the word antispasmodic. I'm much more interested in this idea of relaxing tension, because that's what I find these plants actually do at a fairly low dose. over a period of time. So lobelia, this little beauty here, which I have managed to create a patch of lobelia that has come back this spring in my garden. And it's a really special plant. It's on the United Plant Savers endangered list. So try to grow it if you can. It really likes to grow around mullein, which is interesting as they are both considered lung plants. Mullein is, for me, the ultimate lung cleansing plant, and lobelia is known for deepening the breath. But what lobelia really does is it relaxes tension. It has a particular affinity for all the muscles above the diaphragm. Cramp bark I tend to use for more tension below the diaphragm. This here is cramp bark. Cramp bark has uh, two cramp bark bushes have planted themselves in my garden as well. So this is another very local medicine, depending on where you're living. And it's the twigs. And cramp bark is amazing for easing tension below the diaphragm. Sometimes I use these two, the cramp bark and lobelia, together just to really relax tension, especially if there's a lot of chronic pain. And then the last one is valerian. Valerian. I love valerian. It's such a funny plant, though. You know, I planted valerian in one area of my garden, and I keep going back there this spring looking to see it. Where is the valerian? It should be up, it should be happening. And I just haven't been able to see it. So finally, this morning, I was like, well, I don't know where that valerian is. I'm going to have to like go on Facebook and see if anyone has some extra valerian plants. And then I was looking at another area of my garden, and lo and behold, there are 8 valerian plants growing in that area of the garden where I did not plant it. And that's so valerian. You know, valerian's ruled by Mercury, very like will do its own thing. But this plant is beautiful for relaxing tension in the body, particular visceral tension. So tension in within the organs, particular bladder and lungs and heart, stomach. It will relax tension in the organs and ease. When we relax, there's better blood flow. There's a better movement of the nervous system. Inflammation can resolve, and the connective tissue gets a chance to do its work of helping the whole body flow together in a good way. I always do low dose valerian. I find it's a very effective plant at a very low dose. So yeah, so Rodin. Um, so this is the thinker. So he looks kind of stiff to me, you know, and so if we overthink, if we're thinking too much, like that creates tension in the body, it creates heat. A lot of thinking creates heat. I love to think, but I have to manage my thinking with pleasure. I always think the counterbalance to overthinking is pleasure, and the connective tissue is definitely about pleasure. It likes to move, it likes to flow. It's not like, yeah. So you want to think, you have to feed your connective tissue pleasure. And this goes back to what we were initially thinking about with likes to be juicy. Connective tissue likes to be juicy. But this goes back to this whole idea of you know, how we are interacting with the web of life. If we're acting in a fragmented way, repetitive thoughts, repetitive emotions, like just can't get out of a loop, or if we can engage with the beauty and the pleasure of life. And I'm not someone who's like, oh, we have to be happy all the time. Clearly, that is a crazy making idea. But there does need to be pleasure every day in every life of some sort. And that will help keep a good flow within the body. Pleasure is very important for flow. And a plant that will help us do that, help ease that chronic repetitive thinking, as well as relax tension in the body, is skullcap. And I love skull cap. A nice fresh plant skull cap tincture is a beautiful thing. And if you can't get a fresh plant one, make a dry plant skull cap. It's a beautiful thing. It has helped so many people. Relax the shoulders, deepen the breath, ease tension in the pelvis, and pull all that thinking out of the mind. So let's talk a little bit about signs of imbalance. Sorry for the super creepy image. But signs of imbalance are repetitive thoughts and lack of creativity, a lack of movement, a loss of emotional dexterity, stiffness, creaky, cracky, sense of dryness, leaks, whereas as opposed to dryness, leakiness. So incontinence or like fluid buildup in one part of your body. Um, yeah, leaks. You'll see leaky tissue in clinic. Unresolved inflammation, that's affecting the connective tissue, and it might be the connective tissue needs to heal. And that's where you start using your plants like plantain and echinacea and your flavonoids, your plants high in flavonoids. Chronic microbiome imbalance. So some people might call that infection. I call it a chronic microbiome imbalance. And the bacteria is in the wrong place in the body and it's eating through connective tissue. And cancer, the same thing. Cancer you need to really pay attention to the health of the connective tissue if you're working with someone with cancer to help slow down the spread of the cancer, to protect. A big part of working with cancer and herbal mist is protecting healthy tissues. You want to protect the healthy tissues. So these are just a few videos that I've really loved when I was working on putting this video together. And Drew Barrymore or Drew Barry, his work on animation of what's going on in cells is super interesting stuff. There's a beautiful video of to counterbalance Drew Barry's video of the animation in the cells is the Douglas fir tree showing how what's going on inside its cells and the chlorophyll. It's fascinating. Fascia, got to learn lots about fascia. Bone is connective tissue, muscle, and how they move. And this whole new science of how connective tissue supports the movement of muscles. It's not actually the muscles that's moving, it's the connective tissue that's moving. Then connective tissue of the universe is a super wild video, a video of deep space and how everything's connected, blood and connective tissue, and then Gail Headley's fascia video, which I've already mentioned. So I hope you enjoyed that video. If you have any questions and comments, please let me know. I'm happy to respond. And yeah, check out my other videos. I hope this has been useful to you. And I'll see you later. Bye. And stop recording.